Good evening and welcome to NTD News. I'm Evelyn Lee. Here are today's top stories. A lightning strike has completely destroyed a mural of George Floyd in Toledo, Ohio. The freak occurrence took place almost exactly a year after the mural was painted. A family in North Carolina is filing a multi-million-dollar lawsuit for what they think was an unjustified killing by county police. A Cuban YouTuber arrested during a live television interview returns home. We go into her latest statement. Oregon school staff could be fired this week for proposing policies about gender identity issues off school grounds. They're currently suing the district. And July 20th marks the 22nd anniversary of the Chinese Communist Party's persecution against the spiritual group Falun Gong. A practitioner living in Michigan shares his 14 years of persecution. A lightning strike has completely destroyed a mural of George Floyd in Toledo, Ohio. The freak occurrence happened Tuesday afternoon during a storm. NTD's Grace Coulter has the story.
This mural in memory of George Floyd was painted by Ohio artist David Ross almost exactly 1 year ago. Now, as seen in this video, it's been reduced to rubble by a lightning strike. Witnesses told Toledo police that a lightning strike hit the mural during a storm Tuesday afternoon, destroying it. Doppler radar backs up the claim, showing that a strike hit around 4:30 p.m. near where the mural was painted. As seen in these images, the brick around and behind Floyd's face is still standing. One city building inspector said the collapse could have been caused by old age and deterioration. He added that inspectors recently found a bow in the middle of the wall. The Toledo Fire and Rescue Department, however, officially filed the cause as a lightning strike. Numerous social media users have reacted to the news by interpreting the lightning strike as symbolic or a divine message, with some saying they thought the mural was struck down because Floyd's name and image has been used for political purposes. However, some users called this interpretation superstitious. Several Toledo residents expressed sadness over the loss of the mural to local news networks, saying the mural meant something to them personally. City officials say they will work with the Arts Commission on planning a new mural, adding they were heartbroken to see the artist's work collapse. Grace Coulter, NTD News.
The family of a black man is filing a $30 million lawsuit after he was shot and killed in April by sheriff's deputies in Elizabeth City, North Carolina.
The victim's family says Andrew Brown Jr. died because of the officer's intentional and reckless disregard of his life. Brown was killed while sheriff's deputies were serving drug-related warrants at his home. The deputies surrounded Brown in his BMW before he tried to flee the scene. They fired several shots at and into his vehicle. He was killed by a bullet to the back of his head.
This lawsuit was easy to draft because the facts in this case is very easy that anybody can see. This was an unlawful killing, a murder of Andrew Brown.
Back in May, however, a county district attorney ruled that the fatal shooting was justified.
Mr. Brown's death, while tragic, was justified because Mr. Brown's actions caused 3 deputies with the Pasquotank County Sheriff's Office to reasonably believe it was necessary to use deadly force.
He had also said that none of the officers involved in the incident will be criminally charged. In the body cam footage, the deputies can be seen arriving at Brown's home where he is already seated in his BMW. After they surrounded his car, Brown takes off by steering his car through the lawn toward a road. The officers opened fire from behind, which resulted in Brown's death. The family's attorney says they now seek compensatory and punitive damages for his death through the lawsuit.
President Biden met with Senate Democrats on Capitol Hill today. They discussed a plan to move forward with the Democrats' latest $3.5 trillion spending proposal. This package is an effort to pass Biden's proposed social programs and clean energy projects. NTD's Melina Weisskopf reports from Capitol Hill.
The Democrats' newly negotiated $3.5 trillion spending plan funds health care, education, and clean energy initiatives. There's no official plan on paper just yet, but Senate Leader Chuck Schumer says this plan includes every major plan proposed by Biden so far. It would also expand Medicare coverage to include dental, hearing, and vision, which is something that Senator Bernie Sanders in particular has been working very hard on.
You got mom and dad going to work and they can't afford childcare. They're scared to death about whether or not they can afford to send their kids to college.
Now, it would be paid for by taxing the wealthiest Americans, but actually passing this bill is only possible if all Democrats are on board with it. They need all 50 Democrat votes in order to get it done. And that's one reason why President Biden came to meet with Senate Democrats today, to make sure everyone is on board with this effort.
I have no comments, just saying great to be home, great to be back with all my colleagues, and I think we're going to get a lot done.
A couple of moderate Democrat senators have expressed concerns over the price tag and pay-fors, but they do say that they're open to this new $3.5 trillion package. Senator Joe Manchin in particular says he is anxiously reviewing the bill before he decides whether or not he will endorse it. But moderate Democrat Senator John Tester says that he definitely supports it and he will vote to advance it. Now, if Democrats can lock in all 50 votes needed to get this passed, then they can pass it without any Republican votes. Senate Leader Schumer aims to bring both this $3.5 trillion package as well as the bipartisan hard infrastructure package to the Senate floor by the August recess, but neither Schumer nor President Biden would answer reporters' questions about whether or not they have enough Democrat support to get this $3.5 trillion package passed. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
And today, Senate Democrats announced their plan to legalize marijuana at the federal level. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer joined two other Democrats to unveil their plan to the press and propped up the new plan on the Senate floor.
Principally, to end the prohibition on marijuana at the federal level for the first time in several generations. Over the past decade, Americans' attitudes towards marijuana have undergone a dramatic transformation. Listen to this. Nearly 70% of Americans support legalizing adult use of marijuana.
Right now, 18 states have legalized marijuana for recreational use, while 37 have legalized using it as a medicine. Now, Senate Democrats want to change the federal law to decriminalize it in all 50 states. However, states would still have their own marijuana laws. The Democrats' proposal would remove cannabis from the federal list of controlled substances, and it would wipe clean federal records of people who've been charged on cannabis offenses. Under the proposal, people who are serving time in federal prison for a marijuana charge will be able to petition a court for resentencing. And Vice President Kamala Harris met with the Texas Democratic lawmaker in Washington, D.C. She said their act was courageous, comparing them to the men and women who shed blood to help pass the Voting Rights Act in 1965. Meanwhile, Texas Governor Greg Abbott is calling on Democrats to stop with the misinformation. Here's NTD's Jason Perry with more on that.
President Biden said the recent voting bills passed by Republicans has brought about the most significant test of our democracy since the Civil War. This as Vice President Harris met with Texas Democratic lawmakers who fled to Washington, D.C. to prevent a vote on the latest voting reform bill. She praised the Texas lawmakers for their courage.
In line with the legacy of everyone from Frederick Douglass, who's over my right shoulder, when he fought for the right of black men to vote in America, to the legacy that includes all those women who marched down Pennsylvania Avenue for women's right to vote, to all of those folks who shed their blood on the Edmund Pettus Bridge to make sure that we would in 1965 pass the Voting Rights Act.
According to the Wall Street Journal, the Texas bill will effectively end drive-through voting, which was enacted due to the pandemic. It will also end 24-hour voting, but expand voting hours while making mail-in voters identify themselves. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton spoke on Fox News and said the whole point of the bills is to prevent voter fraud. He explained that Texas works to make it easy for voters to show ID.
We allow for 2 weeks of early voting. We allow for 7 different forms of ID. We'll give you an ID if you can't afford an ID. No one is without an ID. We also know that IDs are used, across all types of different situations, from getting on an airline to going to a hotel to getting government benefits. And so we're not asking one group to give a form of ID and another not to. Everyone has to prove who they are so that we can verify that the right people are voting.
But Senator Raphael Warnock has a different interpretation of the bills. He says the fight against people's right to vote is a good reason to federalize elections.
We've got to have federal standards that push against what we are seeing in Texas and what we are seeing in Georgia. This is a shameless, unabashed assault on people's voting rights.
Governor Abbott clarified the purpose of the Texas voter reform bills.
President Biden and the Democrats must stop the misinformation. Texas is very simply making it easier to vote and harder to cheat.
Senate Democrats are planning to go on the road for the first time in over 20 years. The Senate Rules Committee is going to Georgia to stand against the recent voting reform bills passed there. They say the Georgia voting reform bill was also trying to suppress voting rights. Jason Perry, NTD News.
And we're seeing more videos of Cubans being arrested, beaten, or shot during the protests. A Cuban YouTuber was arrested during a live on-camera interview with a Spanish television station. NTD's Miguel Moreno has more on what happened and her return home.
Cuban YouTuber Dina Stars joined the protests, seen in this video chanting Patria y Vida. Homeland and life, an inversion of communist Che Guevara's Homeland or Death. During an interview with a Spanish television show, Stars was interrupted and arrested.
They're taking me. Live via Spain, I will hold the Cuban government responsible for whatever happens to me. I have to go now. I have to go now.
This video was uploaded by a Twitter user saying it's the moment she was let out and taken away by Cuban state police. Stars reported that she returned home a few hours ago, saying she wasn't mistreated or held hostage.
They took me for instigating crimes, which was for promoting the protest. But they didn't treat me badly, gentlemen. They didn't torture me, like what they're saying around there. They didn't mistreat me, I swear to you. You guys know I'm on the side of truth.
Human rights organization Cuba reports that between the 11th and the 13th of July, at least 148 people have either disappeared or been detained. 12 have been released. Miguel Moreno, NTD News.
A vice principal and teacher in Oregon could be fired for suggesting that bathrooms and locker rooms be labeled for anatomical males and anatomical females. The school board will have to either choose to fire or keep them this week. NTD's Miguel Moreno has more on this and a lawsuit the two educators have filed.
My name is Katie, and my experience with youth is that I have been teaching for the last 10 years.
Two educators are suing the Grants Pass School District in Oregon, accusing a public school of violating their First Amendment rights. Vice Principal Rachel Damiano and teacher Katie Medar work at North Middle School. The school put them on paid leave on April for making a few suggestions in this video.
For example, at the middle school, typically you would go and you would see, okay, here is, whether it's a restroom or locker room, it says boys, and this one says girls on it. So instead of it saying that, it would then read anatomical male, anatomical female.
This video is part of their I Resolve campaign, which says it looks to propose solutions to gender identity issues in schools. In an April statement to the media, the school district said they didn't approve or endorse these social media posts and that an investigation is underway. The school board will decide on whether to fire them this week over allegations of inappropriate behavior.
This would be a clear violation of the free speech clause of the First Amendment.
Brad Dacus is president at Pacific Justice Institute, the law firm representing the two educators. Dacus says the school district has no business punishing them for expressing their thoughts in a private forum outside school grounds.
And why do you feel that your clients have a strong case?
Well, if our clients don't prevail, that would mean that the government can supervise what people say anytime, as long as they're working for the government. This would be a travesty to think that as a condition to work for the U.S. government, you inherently render your free speech First Amendment rights not only at work, but also in your own private time. Communicating to private individuals, people that you know, in your own private forum. This would have a chilling effect on free speech for people working for the government.
On Thursday, the Grants Pass School District 7 will have a school board meeting and vote to either fire or retain Damiano and Medar. Miguel Moreno, NTD News.
Pennsylvania parents and community members fight back against efforts by the state's Department of Education to push critical race theory. They gathered with attorneys and lawmakers at the steps of the state capitol before a Board of Education meeting. NTD's Kevin Hogan has more.
Of our children.
Just under 100 people turned out to protest against teaching students to identify each other based on the color of their skin. The Wednesday rally in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania featured speeches from lawmakers, including Republican Barb Gleim, who is working to root out critical race theory from the state's school system.
Our bill does not prohibit the teaching of history or violate any part of the First Amendment. Our bill seeks to ensure that children are not shamed, blamed, or otherwise singled out for acts committed by others throughout history.
The rally took place 2 hours before a Pennsylvania Board of Education meeting was set to begin. The board canceled its in-person meeting and scheduled a virtual meeting instead. The event's organizer told the Epoch Times she believes the board did so to shut out the voices of parents opposing the theory. What's more, Mark Scaringi, an attorney at the event, said the theory is teaching white students that they are inherently racist and that American schools and institutions are systemically racist. He also cited black professors and authors who say the theory dehumanizes black Americans.
It hurts the black children, too, to be constantly told by their teachers and administrators that they are oppressed and that they are victims and that they can't learn how to do math because of their victimhood status. It's a terrible ideology that's being put into our schools.
Supporters of CRT say it's important to question the foundations of the nation and that socioeconomic disparities exist as legacies of racial oppression in the U.S. But education expert Jonathan Butcher points out that parents around the country are rejecting the theory at rallies, for example, in Virginia, Texas, and Delaware. He gives an example of one of their grievances.
California's new math curriculum called Equitable Math talks about white supremacy some 54 times in one of their manuals.
Gleim's bill would defund any school that includes, in her words, the anti-American critical race theory as part of its curriculum. Kevin Hogan, NTD News.
And also in Pennsylvania, a gubernatorial candidate is speaking out against critical race theory. He tells NTD how the theory works and how it goes against meritocracy. NTD's Ellison Lee has the details.
John Venture is among the 7 Republicans running for Pennsylvania governor next November. He's running on a never socialist platform, and he has this message to make about critical race theory.
This is a big problem. It's a real problem, but it needs to be stopped right now. You know, people need to follow what Dr. Martin Luther King said. He didn't talk about skin color. He said, judge people on the quality of their character and their achievements.
Venture says critical race theory is only used to turn people against each other, and that it's always going to create conflicts. That's because proponents of the theory capitalize on the fact that people have different biological traits.
The far left, the progressives, know that we don't look the same. We're not the same. The only way we're equal is in how different we are. So it's very easy to have identity politics, critical race theory, and pit one group against the other. And it's black against white. They're trying to turn Asian against white, Hispanic against white.
One of the reasons Venture is running for governor is to make sure Pennsylvania puts a stop to what he calls this horrible behavior, and he plans to follow Dr. Martin Luther King's words.
He didn't say, judge me on whether I'm white, brown, yellow, red. You know, he didn't say anything about skin color. And that's why I say also in my plan, we're going to remove race and gender from all applications, employment applications, school applications. We're not going to look at you as a quota system.
Venture gives the example of the New York City public school system, which recently announced intentions to get rid of standardized admission tests. They say that's because not enough Black and Latino students are getting into selected schools. Venture argues such practice sacrifices meritocracy.
I like a merit system. I think it's the best person for the job. The best person should get in. I understand you don't want it all dominated by one group. I can understand the thinking, but don't you want the best person for the job?
Venture says there will never be peace with identity politics and critical race theory. Once proponents of the theory are done with one group, they will move on to the next group. That's why he wants Pennsylvania to have a merit system instead. Allison Lee, NTD News.
A software engineer living in Michigan recounts his horrific experiences before he fled from China. He was jailed and tortured for over 8 years simply because of his beliefs. Here are the details.
I was born in Shandong Province, China, 1973. In 1996, I got my bachelor's degree and was recommended to pursue a doctorate at Tsinghua University. The next year, I started practicing Falun Gong.
During the International Religious Freedom Summit in Washington, D.C., Weiyu Wang shared his experience in China practicing Falun Gong, also known as Falun Dafa. It's a spiritual discipline and meditation practice based on the principles of truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance. It was first introduced to the public in 1992, and by 1999, there were an estimated 70 million to 100 million practitioners in China. As the number of adherents grew, party leader Jiang Zemin began brutally persecuting Falun Gong practitioners on July 20, 1999. It's widely believed Jiang felt threatened that there were more people practicing Falun Gong than there were members of the party. After that, Wang was publicly condemned by his classmates under the instruction of a party leader at Tsinghua University.
I still cannot forget the face of my close friend, who stood up and threatened me. If you keep your belief in Falun Gong, I will stab you to death. I was very astonished at that time. I had no idea that propaganda could change a person in such a dramatic way.
Wang refused to give up his beliefs and was therefore forced to suspend his schooling twice and give up his doctorate degree. In August 2002, he was kidnapped by CCP security personnel on the streets.
They knocked my glasses off my face and then stepped on my head. This violence surprised the passers-by, and some of them stopped and watched. The assailants told the pedestrians that I was a thief. I shouted back, I'm a Falun Gong practitioner, not a thief. They were so scared at my words, they quickly covered my mouth and stuffed me into a car.
Wang was sent to a secret location that detained only Falun Gong practitioners, called the Legal Training Center. There he was beaten and tortured non-stop from 6 p.m. until 5 a.m. the next day.
I was shocked all over my body, including all 10 fingertips, and they even pierced 2 electrodes into my back. The authorities would jump to smash my head with their elbows, called me a counter-revolutionist, and shouted with glee to scorch every inch of skin.
Wang was jailed and tortured for 6 months before he was sent to a detention center in Beijing. In 2004, he was sentenced to 8 years of prison and sent to Changjin prison in Tianjin. There, some prisoners who were murderers and drug traffickers were chosen to monitor Falun Gong practitioners 24 hours a day.
We were forced to labor outside, planting radishes, weeding, digging, or do factory work like wrapping candies, making paper muffin cups, or sports balls like volleyballs. While sewing those balls by hand, a practitioner pierced his eyeball with the iron crochet by accident because we didn't have any protective equipment.
After 14 years of suffering under the CCP's persecution, Wang fled the country for the United States. But sadly, many of his fellow practitioners at Tsinghua University are still being persecuted for their faith. Wang said there is one thing that the CCP is afraid of, the voices of justice. He says that's because darkness is always afraid of being exposed to the light.
Up next, Iranian operatives tried to kidnap a journalist in New York City after she spoke out against the Iranian regime. And Ralph Lauren created a new special jacket for this year's Olympic Games in Tokyo, so athletes can keep a cool head. That and more in just a moment. 4 Iranians alleged to be intelligence operatives for Tehran are charged with plotting to kidnap a New York journalist. According to a Justice Department indictment, the journalist was critical of Iran. Here are the details.
U.S. prosecutors have charged 4 Iranians alleged to be intelligence operatives for Tehran. They're accused of plotting to kidnap a New York journalist and human rights activist who was critical of Iran. That's according to a Justice Department indictment unsealed on Tuesday. Prosecutors said the Iranian operatives had researched how they might spirit the journalist out of New York on a high-speed boat headed for Caracas. Iranian-American journalist Masih Alinjad contributed to the US government-funded Voice of America Persian language service and reports on human rights issues in Iran. Here she shows her Twitter followers the police outside her apartment.
The police have been around my place for the past 2 weeks now. When I asked them why they were here, they told me it was to protect me. This is also what the FBI told me. They said they'd tell me later, but that the police has to be here often. They're here from 5 a.m. to midnight. I'm so not used to being protected by the police. Every time I see them, I assume they're here to arrest me. Yes, I'm also worried. I see them often, even when I get out to check on my flowers in my garden. But it imbues me with the feeling of safety when I see the police protecting me. This wouldn't have happened in my homeland. It's a weird feeling.
US authorities said in recent years, Iranian intelligence officers have tricked a number of overseas activists to travel to destinations where they are kidnapped and sent back to Iran. In 2019, Iranian intelligence officers lured Ruhollah Zam, a journalist living in France, out of the country, capturing and later executing him in Iran on sedition charges. Reuters reached Alinjad after the indictment was released. She said she was in a state of shock. She said she had been working with the Federal Bureau of Investigation since the agency approached her 8 months ago with photographs taken by the plotters. She said the Islamic Republic had gotten very close. Iran rejected the claims as ridiculous and baseless.
Representing one's nation at the Olympics is, of course, a great honor for every athlete. But being flag bearer requires even more coolness. Here's NTD's Arian Pastar.
This year's flag bearers for Team USA might be the coolest ever. Tokyo can get pretty hot and humid, and the yet unannounced flag bearers are going to have a special jacket for that occasion.
So we've added a cooling technology to the jacket. So just as it looks classic, it's infused with a modern technology that's totally groundbreaking.
The technology disperses heat from the skin through a fan device at the back of the neck. There's a lightweight personal battery controller stashed inside. It's similar to how large computers are kept cool.
I know that this jacket is working, is really cooling me, because when I push this button, I feel the air conditioner or the fan in my back, and I can feel actually the breeze.
The rest of Team USA will walk in tailored navy blazers made of American-grown wool.
On TV, you see the opening ceremonies as like a 1 hour ordeal, but it's really like an 8-9 hour thing. So you just want to feel comfortable and make sure you feel good while you're comfortable.
Ralph Lauren makes the outfits for Team USA, but some have criticized the company during the London Games for providing uniforms made in China. Arian Pastar, NTD News.
And up next, a fire in Northern California burned down a small town. When residents returned home, much of their property was in ashes. And a California bill aims to restructure the state's criminal justice system. People who have criminal charges could be released under a $0 bail policy before trial. That and more after a short break.
% of news outlets in the United States are controlled by 6 corporations. They're not out to tell you the truth of what's happening. They're out to tell you the picture of the world that they represent. The mission of the Epoch Times is to chase the truth, to ground all statements in facts, and prevent people from being misled. This is a battle between truth and deceit. Subscribe today and join the Americans who are seeking truth and tradition. We'd love to have you on board.
A Northern California fire has burned down a small town. Residents are now allowed to return, but find their homes and property burned. NTD's Eileen Ang has more details.
A California wildfire claimed dozens of structures in the small mountain town of Doyle. Beverly Howdeshell returned to where her home stood this week to find nothing but ashes and debris.
I'm totally lost. I have no idea in this world what I'm going to do now. Because I'm not a rich person. I can't just buy another house, boom, like that. I had insurance. I haven't heard from them yet. I called them, but I haven't heard nothing.
The 79-year-old was among thousands of people evacuated from a wildfire burning along the Nevada border. But she and other residents of Doyle, a community of about 600 people, were allowed to return since the fire had already burned through that area.
My house burned down. What can I do?
Dozens of structures burned throughout Doyle, including several houses. Howdeshell is now staying with her granddaughter, who also lives in the town.
I was really shocked about that side, yes. I had been told by my niece who worked for the fire department that my shed had gone, so I wasn't surprised here. I was surprised the house was still here. It was scary when we left here.
Rose Roberts, another 79-year-old Doyle resident, was luckier. 4 other homes surrounding her property caught fire and burned to the ground, but Roberts only lost her backyard shed.
I think it takes a while to soak in.
Roberts says Doyle is a tight-knit community which will help those who lost their homes. She says the community should feel fortunate that no one was killed in the wildfire. Overall, about 3,000 people living in the rural Northern California's Lassen and Plumas counties remain evacuated as crews work to contain a remote lightning-ignited wildfire. Firefighters are making progress on the Buckworth complex, a combined pair of blazes that have blackened more than 145 square miles. They have contained about a quarter of the blaze, but still expect extreme fire activity throughout the week. Wildfires that have torched homes and forced thousands to evacuate are burning across 10 parched western states. Nearly 60 large active wildfires are burning from Alaska to Wyoming. Eileen Ang, NTD News, California.
And a California Senate bill that would restructure California's criminal justice system is advancing through the Public Safety Committee. It would set bail at $0 for a wide range of criminal charges.
In a 5-2 vote, California Senate Bill 262 passed through the State Assembly's Public Security Committee. It will remove the authority of judges to use their discretion in setting bail. Instead, bail will be set at $0 for all offenses except for certain felonies. State Senator Robert Hertzberg introduced SB 262.
We again didn't want to get out there on a limb. We didn't want to get out there and be stupid and have everybody beat us up and saying, Hertzberg, you're inventing this world and it doesn't work. We wanted to show something that worked.
The bill's current language would exclude crimes such as assault with force that will likely cause bodily injury, witness intimidation, hate crimes, human trafficking, and child abuse. Former California State Senator and retired Judge Quentin Kopp views the bill as a watered-down version of a bill Hertzberg previously authored.
It's the same ingredients. It's a repetition. This system has been condemned in states which have used it. It is a bill of goods being peddled, and the whole notion of zero bail is contrary to American legal history.
Proponents of bail reform argue that buying one's way out of jail is unconstitutional.
On March 25th, 2021, the Supreme Court of the state of California, in a unanimous decision, held that the common practice of conditioning freedom solely on whether the arrestee can afford bail is unconstitutional.
The director of the American Bail Coalition warns that removing bails is not considering others involved in the judicial process.
The staff of the committee pointed out that the zero bail and binding judicial discretion is a problem, and that we need to take this danger to the community into account when setting bail and not take that tool away from judges.
Clayton says the bill is a potential threat to the tens of thousands of jobs related to the bail industry in California.
As is, I think there's no bail industry in California under this bill.
During the lockdown, California has released arrestees with zero bail to slow the spread of COVID-19, also known as the CCP virus. Crime across California has increased, including the San Francisco Sheriff's Office reporting that 55% of alleged criminals reoffended before trial. Analysts say SB 262 is expected to pass the legislature after more revisions.
A California Senate bill that incentivized people to stay sober is making its way through the legislature. But critics are skeptical of its ethical implications. NTD's Jason Blair with more on that.
California's Senate Bill 110 will employ a drug rehabilitation method called contingency management. According to lawmakers, this therapy method uses positive reinforcement as a form of treatment mainly for people suffering from methamphetamine addiction.
What contingency management it's a therapy developed with 30 years of scientific research. It provides incentives that increase in value in exchange for biological samples, either urine or saliva, that document drug abstinence.
Senator Scott Wiener, who introduced the bill, says the therapy is frequently used by the Veterans Affairs Administration and has proven to be the most effective method of treatment for methamphetamine addiction. Veterans involved in this treatment can participate in raffles based on their abstinence. Longer periods of abstinence allow for more drawings, which range in rewards from words of encouragement to $100.
What we know about contingency management, it is the most powerful treatment for stimulant use disorder, full stop.
However, some clinicians and researchers have expressed concerns over the therapy, saying it is similar to bribery and that it is unethical to pay people for what they should be doing anyway. Other leaders are concerned that Medi-Cal covering contingency management therapy could violate federal laws made to prevent kickbacks for doing specific medical treatment. Wiener argues that the bill does not violate these laws. The bill passed unanimously in both the State Senate and Assembly Health Committee and will next be re-referred to the Committee on Appropriations. If passed, contingency management will be a covered form of treatment under California's state-sponsored medical program, Medi-Cal. Jason Blair, NTD News, San Francisco.
Coming up, you may have heard of the Red Sea, but have you seen a red river? Residents in a Chinese town are surprised to find a local river turning red. That and more here on NTD News. A Chinese online influencer is making false claims about the recent protests in Cuba. The influencer says instead of protesting against communism, the Cubans are showing support for the communist regime. NTD's Tiffany Meyer brings us more.
As Cuban citizens take to the streets in protests against the communist regime, a famous Chinese influencer is making false claims about their motives, claiming their actions instead show support for communist rule. Chinese netizen Gu Yan Mu Chen has more than 6 million followers on Chinese social media platform Weibo. The microblogging website is often considered China's version of Twitter. Mu Chen is known for her staunch support of Chinese authorities and her anti-American stance. She also writes articles published by state-run media outlets like the Global Times. On Monday, she posted a video showing Cuban protesters, along with the caption, "The Cubans are on the street in support of their president." They are protesting against the far-right opposition agents who are bought off by the U.S. and who try to destroy social stability. But a Chinese dissident disagreed, commenting on Twitter that it was clearly the people of 32 cities taking to the streets, protesting against the dictatorship of the Cuban Communist Party. But when the news came to the CCP, they turned it into a demonstration of the people in support of the Cuban Communist Party and against the United States. Adding that how shameless does someone have to be to lie through their teeth like that? A rare sight, a river in central China has turned red after rainfall. It happened in the city of Enshi in Hubei province on Monday. Locals were surprised and filmed it. The red water was seen running down from a mountain. Local media also reported on the rare sight, and relevant authorities are investigating. The day before, heavy rain hit the city, and authorities issued a red warning.
The Hong Kong Book Fair is making a comeback this week after being cancelled last year due to the pandemic. But authorities are warning against displaying what they call subversive or separatist books. How is a new national security law going to affect this year's book fair? Olivia Chan reports.
For the first time since the Hong Kong Book Fair began in 1990, veteran publisher Jimmy Pang will not display any political books at his booth. The book fair, which draws about 1 million visitors each year, was cancelled last year due to the global health crisis. It resumes this week under the shadow of a new national security law. Authorities have warned against, quote, subversive or separatist books, too vaguely defined crimes.
For so many years, from the first book fair that I participated in until now, this year's fair is the most perilous one. In the past, we had no such worries, but this time our self-censorship is so serious.
Pang would have liked to display a book that documents Hong Kong's youngest protesters and A Sea of People by Claudia Mo, a former legislator who was arrested under the new law and denied bail. But he decided against it and said he wanted to, quote, avoid trouble. Another publisher, Raymond Young, said editors were instructed to follow certain red line or regulations. In one of his new books, he blurred out the logo of Hong Kong newspaper Apple Daily in an illustration. The pro-democracy tabloid printed its last edition in June, after police froze its assets and arrested its executives in a national security probe.
There are other 3 books that we want to display here, but they are banned by the printers already. So they have already done some kind of censorship for us. Like they feel that actually the content may not be safe, that they do not want to take risks because of the Apple Daily incident.
The government's Trade Development Council, the organizer of the fair, said books would not go through a vetting or censorship process, but exhibitors had to be, quote, self-disciplined.
Coming up, the United Arab Emirates opened its new embassy in Tel Aviv on Wednesday. The two countries have been brought together by shared unease about Iran. And France is celebrating its national holiday Bastille Day with a festive parade on Champs-Élysées. That and more here on NTD News.
Hello, I'm Mike Lindell, inventor of MyPillow. Thanks to your support, you've helped make MyPillow become one of the fastest growing companies in America. I'm interrupting this commercial right now. Retailers have canceled MyPillow, and to thank you for your support, I'm going to pass the savings directly on to you. For example, you get my 6-piece towel sets, regular $109.99, now only $44.98, or MyPillow dog beds for as low as $19.99 with your promo code.
With Shepherd Lock, you can unlock your door by touching the deadbolt. Shepherd also boosts your home's security by proactively freezing in place if anyone ever tries to tamper with your lock or break down your door. We also make it easy to manage keys without hiding them under the mat. Easily create temporary keys for house guests, neighbors, or anyone else. Installation takes less than 5 minutes. Visit shepherdlock.com to buy your Shepherd Lock today, and for a limited time, enjoy 10% off.
The United Arab Emirates opened its new embassy in Tel Aviv on Wednesday. The two countries have been brought together by shared unease about Iran and diplomatic accords brokered by the Trump administration.
The UAE has now become the first Gulf state to have an embassy in Israel after the flurry of positive diplomatic breakthroughs between Israel and some predominantly Muslim countries that was brokered by the Trump administration. Israel's President Isaac Herzog attended the opening ceremony in Tel Aviv with UAE Ambassador Mohammed Al-Khaja.
10 months ago, our two countries signed the Abraham Accords with a vision to pursue peace, security, and prosperity in our region. Today's official opening of the EU Embassy is a key part of that vision.
While seeing the Emirati flag flying proudly in Tel Aviv might have seemed like a far-fetched dream just about a year ago, in many ways nothing could be more natural and normal.
The two countries were brought together last year by the U.S. Accords and mutual distrust of Iran. Bahrain, Sudan, and Morocco have also improved their ties with Israel, but to the anger of Palestinian officials. The UAE says, though, that improved ties with Israel should ultimately benefit Palestinian issues.
Today, France is celebrating its national holiday, Bastille Day, and thousands of military troops are marching in a parade. Here's NTD's David Vives.
France is celebrating its national day, called Bastille Day. Thousands of military and public security personnel paraded by foot on vehicles and aboard jets over Paris' Champs-Élysées Avenue on Wednesday. Some 5,000 participants took part in this year's parade, which started from the Arc de Triomphe monument and ended with a ceremony on the Concorde Square.
Of course, I really enjoy being here. Seeing the organization of the parade, seeing what the country's defense looks like, it makes me proud.
This year, the holiday celebrated love as well. A trainee soldier took the occasion to propose his now fiancée just before the French president rode down the boulevard. 2021 marks the return of the traditional military parade after last year's celebrations were replaced by a limited access event due to the pandemic. The event showcased the country's armed forces. With more than 200,000 troops, France has the largest army in Europe. Currently, 5,000 French soldiers are deployed in Africa's Sahel region to fight terrorist groups threatening the country. President Macron announced on Monday that the operation will be finished by the beginning of 2022, and they will withdraw more than 2,000 troops. David Vives, NTD News.
And on this same day, some took to the street to protest against President Macron's plan to require a vaccine certificate to gain entry to bars, restaurants, and cinemas. French police used tear gas to disperse the crowd.
Macron this week announced sweeping measures to fight a rapid surge in new CCP virus infections, including the mandatory vaccination of health workers and new health pass rules for the wider public. In doing so, he went further than most European nations. As the highly contagious Delta variant fans a new wave of cases, other governments are watching carefully to see how the French public responds. The health pass is also referred to as the Green Pass. To get one, citizens have to show proof that they have been fully vaccinated, taken a recent negative COVID test, or recently recovered from COVID. The police stepped in shortly after scores of protesters marched down a boulevard in central Paris on Wednesday without permission from the Paris authorities. Some wore badges saying no to the health pass. Some critics of Macron's plan, which will require shopping malls, cafes, bars, and restaurants to check the health passes of all patrons from August, accuse the president of trampling on freedoms and discriminating against those who do not want the vaccine. French media reports among other proposals in the government's draft bill is the mandatory 10-day isolation for anyone who tests positive, with police making random checks.
The Royal Shakespeare Company has built a new theater next to the River Avon, and this week embarks on its first full-scale production in front of a live audience since last year. NTD's Natalia Nutting brings us more on this.
The Royal Shakespeare Company opened an outdoor theatre with a new version of The Comedy of Errors on Tuesday. Its first full-scale production in front of a live audience in over a year. Based in playwright William Shakespeare's birthplace of Stratford-upon-Avon, the company, known as the RSC, built the new theatre by the River Avon.
You know, it's a beautiful spot here in Stratford. We're right by the river right here now, and so we get some heckling from some swans occasionally, all that kind of stuff. But I guess this is what happened 400 years ago. You know, there weren't too many roofs around and stuff like that in the theatre then.
The Comedy of Errors had been due to begin performances in April 2020, but the RSC had to close its doors to live audiences due to the pandemic.
I felt there are two really powerful reasons to build this theatre, one of which was as a sort of symbol, a symbol of regeneration and of opening up, but also as a transition, so that people will feel very comfortable sitting outside in the open air.
Under the Prime Minister's roadmap out of lockdown, entertainment venues in England have been welcoming audiences back since mid-May at 50% capacity. From Monday, they will no longer face restrictions on numbers.
I think because we're so used to being outside and in the fresh air, and you'll just feel safe and evening like this, but we've come prepared with waterproof coats and everything.
The RSC's open-air theatre can sit 500 people and is showing The Comedy of Errors until the end of September. Natalia Nutting, NTD News.
Are you looking for some company while enjoying a cup of tea or coffee? Inside one special cafe in Brazil, cats will do the trick. The feline haven has been called a paradise for cat lovers, so let's take a look.
Here, cappuccinos and pastries are served with whiskers and purrs. This is Gato Cafe, a cat cafe in downtown Rio, the second most populous city in Brazil. Stroking a tabby with white patches, a customer says she's having the time of her life.
When I got here and looked at this place, I couldn't even believe it existed. I'm in paradise with all of these cats. I'm in love with them. It feels like I'm living in a dream full of kittens.
Paw-shaped biscuits and lattes dusted with cat silhouettes are also on the menu. Cat cafes originated in Taiwan in 1998 and were first popularized in Asia. Opened last July, Gato Cafe also functions as an adoption site for abandoned cats. They're rescued by a local organization known as Bunker Whiskers, or Bigajas do Bunker.
There are other cat cafes in the world, but here we are focused on the adoption and well-being of our cats. We work hard to have our own language, to have the Gato Cafe experience.
According to the Brazilian Pet Institute, the country was home to almost 80 million pet cats and dogs in 2019. Many animals were abandoned amid the pandemic as owners passed away and families were thrown into disarray.
And that's it for today's news. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Evelyn Lee.
We have a new channel. Subscribe to us on YouTube at NTD News. Get the highlights of our news broadcast and the most important headlines that we curate especially for you.
Don't let YouTube decide what information you get. That's your choice. YouTube is deleting our videos and cuts you off from a source of honest reporting. Make sure you don't lose access to NTD's news content, and take a quick moment to subscribe to our newsletter so no matter what happens here, you'll keep your access to a trustworthy news source.